Right, leading tech giants have warned that mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority.
Well, it comes as the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, says the UK can play a leadership role in regulating the use of AI. Well, let's speak now to Shadow International Trade Secretary Nick Thomas-Symonds. Really good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your company. I mean, terrifying headlines on the front of some of the newspapers this morning. The Daily Mail, AI could wipe out humanity. The Eye says AI creators fear the extinction of humanity, comparing the threat to nuclear war and pandemics. I mean, Rishi Sunak is at the forefront of this. He wants to manage the dangers and he's talking with world leaders. How would the Labour Party deal with AI and the speed of which this is all developing? How would you regulate it?
Well, firstly, it's very good to join you this morning. Always great to do that. Well, looking at those headlines this morning, the government's white paper on AI from a couple of months ago already feels out of date, doesn't it? I mean, the government was just offering a series of vague promises and saying that somehow existing regulators were going to deal with this. Well, I don't think that is the correct approach. We need a proper strategic approach from the government. It needs to both regulate, but also allow space for innovation. What we need to do here is to become a world leader in AI. We need to be at the forefront of this new technology, both in terms of mitigating and regulating its dangers, but also seeing its extraordinary possibility as well.
It is something that really, really does worry people. So it's good that you are so happy to answer that question. I wanted to ask you about Labour increasing sugar tax. That's something that Wes Streeting is looking at the moment. Great concern to many families who are already struggling to pay food bills. I mean, food inflation is already at 19.1%.
Yes, and we're looking at a series of options around this, and you're absolutely right. We have to be very careful. We want, obviously, to encourage healthy choices, but we don't want to be adding to the already spiralling cost of living. Some of the things we've been suggesting, for example, is around school breakfast clubs. We think that every child should have access to a healthy breakfast at school. And we've been talking about funding that by abolishing the non-dom tax status so that people with assets around the world who are currently not paying tax on that would pay tax here in the UK. But we also need to look at things like, for example, junk food advertising at post 9 o'clock. We should be implementing that ban. So we need to be taking measures to encourage healthy eating and to deal with childhood obesity as far as we possibly can.
Boris Johnson's text messages, his WhatsApp messages, do you think it should be private? Do you think it should be public? He is in a position of authority. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that the government has to comply with Baroness Hallett's requests for these messages. And the reason is we need to see the full background to the decisions the government made during the pandemic. Now, I totally understand why, for reasons of speed, government ministers and officials did use WhatsApp. I think we can all understand that because of how quickly things were moving. But just as in governments of the past, you had the logic of all the decisions on paper, you had transcripts of phone calls. So now, as Baroness Hallett, the independent chair, has requested, those WhatsApps, as she's asked for, should be provided. And they should be provided, frankly, because the thousands of families out there who lost loved ones in the pandemic deserve to have the truth. And we need to learn the lessons from this health emergency for future health emergencies too.
Do you then suggest that all communication in government should be confidential, or you should be able to offer it out to any inquiry that asks for it? Because that is potentially a dangerous precedent to set, isn't it? It could hinder decision-making at a time of crisis if ministers feel like they can't communicate freely with one another for fear of it being asked for by an inquiry later on down the line.
But this is a specific type of inquiry with specific statutory powers that's been set up. And I've looked carefully at what Baroness Hallett, who's a widely respected former judge, has said. And she is saying, if you look at the notice that she's issued, that she thinks there is relevant material in WhatsApp messages between certain senior ministers, the most senior civil servant. And I think she should be the judge of that. I don't think it is about setting a precedent because of the very particular nature of this inquiry and the very particular powers that Baroness Hallett has got. And I think the government should simply comply with the order that she's made.
OK, moving on to the Australia-New Zealand trade deal comes into effect this week. Do you think it will actually deliver the economic boost that has been promised?
It can deliver an economic boost if the government is willing to actually support our exporters properly. If you look at the moment, this year, 2023, the OBR is saying that exports overall will fall by 6.6%. That's a hit of over £51 billion to the economy. Now, if the government is far more proactive, I've argued, for example, for export hubs in every nation and region of the UK, people actually on the ground specialising in things like high-end climate technology, working with the devolved administrations, with universities and innovators to get that support to exporters.
OK, Nick, thank you so much. Sorry, I'm just going to have to cut you off there. We are running out of time, but really good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your time and all of those stories. Nick Thomas-Symonds there for us.